Okay, so we're working on a 1948 Chevy sedan. It's a Fleet Master. We're converting it into a rat rod, and it had the original 216 six-cylinder engine in it, and the oil pan had been giving us some trouble. We were chasing some pinholes all over the place. It's typical that these things get thin and pitted, and they're very difficult to repair and maintain. In our search for a replacement, we ran into this oil pan, which is what you call new old stock. This oil pan has never been installed on any vehicle. We'll take a close-up shot of these screw holes down here, and as you can see, there has never been a screw put to any of these holes at all. And then looking at the oil drain plug, virtually brand new, right down to the original Teflon washer. This oil pan has been labeled as 1940 through 1953, which is a typical fit for that 216 engine. Unfortunately, it did sustain some water damage over the years. I'm not sure how water would have accumulated in there, but 70 plus years, you know, it's had its mishaps and been kicked around. But anyway, it did sustain some surface rust in there, which we cleaned up fairly well, and we're pretty happy with it. And just to point out to you guys that might be tempted to remove these clips so you can take the tubes out to do some better cleaning in there, just bear in mind these clips are very difficult to get back in. You actually have to bend these tabs up, and when you reposition the clip, bend them tabs back over. You have to be very careful, because if you do that too often and too frequent, you're going to stress those tabs and break them off. So most guys would probably question my choice to not sand this down and paint it. I prefer to leave the original patina. That is the original factory paint when this thing was brand new. Again, it's been kicked around a few years, but I think I prefer to leave it just like it is. So we're looking forward to installing this on our 216 rat rod project, and we'll go from there. Okay, so moving on from the oil pan segment, I thought I would just take a quick shot of the progress we've got going on with this 48 rat rod, in particular to see the transition from the tires and wheels that came with this thing, putting it back to original specification. You can see a tremendous amount of lift that we're going to get with these things. These tires and wheels that we're going to put on this thing come from Coker Tire. They're just incredibly awesome. These are actually going to be tube tire, just like the original. They are powder coated rims, just absolutely beautiful. And you can see the tremendous amount of lift. Most guys that build rat rods, they tend to like to slam these things down to the ground. We're just going to go for that natural lift and bring this thing up. I think we're going to get about 2.5–3 inches of lift just by tires and wheels alone. We're not going to make any modifications to the suspension. We're just going to go totally factory stock. I do have a complete front end rebuild kit to include all of the engine mounts and transmission mounts and things like that. I just haven't gotten around to putting those in yet. But as you can see, these tires are just absolutely monsters, and we're looking forward to putting them on there. We're not going for super wide, we're just simply going for the height on there. Just absolutely beautiful. Okay, so we are continuing to work on this 48 Chevy Rat Rod, the 216 project. And we had a segment earlier on the oil pan, the new old stock, which has been installed, and I absolutely do not regret the choice not to paint it. I think it looks great just like it is. In the foreground here we have an extended supply line to keep our fuel can well away from the engine during our out-of-car engine start. And I think right now let's just go ahead and review and see what we got going on. Alright, well the first thing that jumps out at you is that distributor. It's a HEI, high energy ignition. It's a built-in coil. That thing puts out 65,000 volts. Those are 8mm triple insulated high performance plug wires. And to give you some perspective, That's what the original distributor looks like right there. Pretty dinky in comparison to this big monster we got going on. And down here is the original starter. It is a 6-volt starter. We're putting 12 volts to it, which is really not a problem. It just gives you better cranking power if you put a higher voltage to it. These starters are pretty durable. I took it apart, cleaned everything on the inside. Everything's in great condition and it works just fine. We didn't put any paint to this thing at all. This is all just pure cleanup. The aluminum push tube cover, again, just did the best I could to kind of clean it up. We're not going to try to do anything real wild and crazy and fancy with it. We also replaced the flywheel ring, the starter ring. That was kind of challenging to do here in the garage by hand, but use some ingenuity and creativity and you can make anything happen. We have the fuel filter right there. I'm sorry, the fuel pump, and it is original with the glass dome. And right over here is the PCV valve where the original draft tube connected into, which was also your oil fill. The draft tube was designed to essentially cause a vacuum to clear out the crankcase fumes as you drove down the road. Not very efficient at slow speeds and idles, but that's the technology they had at the time. But we did a conversion, and we're using a vacuum, which is coming off of the intake manifold, where we have a Offenhauser intake. And this is a dual carb intake with Rochester carburetors, rebuilt, remanufactured, just absolutely solid operating carburetors. And we also have Fenton cast iron dual exhaust. These headers are early classic. That's what the guys back in the 40s and 50s used, along with the Offenhauser products. And you'll see that I did fabricate a heat plate to go on the bottom of this manifold. This manifold originally would have gone straight to the exhaust manifold, but you know, with the header configuration you don't have that port, so I had to manufacture that. There are some aftermarket heat plates, but I don't consider them to be efficient, well designed as much as what I did here. I actually have plumbed the exhaust to feed the heat plate to preheat the fuel mixture before it enters into the combustion chambers. A lot of guys would argue and say you should use water. Probably a valid point, but the way I look at it, when you're rat rodding, the last thing you need is a water leak, especially topside. If I blow an exhaust leak or something like that, at least I'm going to get home. A water leak, you're going to be sitting on the side of the road. This is the original oil canister. Again, we just cleaned it up the best we could. We're not worried about trying to sand things down and make it pretty. And off the oil canister, we've got these awesome custom length stainless steel oil lines, braided oil lines, and we're real happy with those as well. Down here we have your 12 volt conversion. It's an alternator. It's a single wire, which you know, that's the only wire that you need getting to your battery. This was a real trick putting in. I had to custom fabricate this bracket down there. That's segments of the original bracket modified to accommodate this 12 volt beast. And you know, we had some difficulty in the front. As you can see, it is just a little bit out of line, but you know, I'll replace a belt every now and again before I'm going to worry about that being out a little bit. I had to take the top mounting bracket. As you can see, it's been reversed and beat out flat in order to accommodate this thing. And the fan and pulley are actually from the original generator. This is what comes with it, and it's just not the right fit for this type of a belt. So I had to make do with the parts and pieces that I got. That's what rat rodding is all about. So as we stand back and take a look, we can see this is a awesome little engine. And here in a few minutes we'll think about going ahead and putting some gas and air to it and fire it up and see how she runs. Okay, we've been making final preparations for this Chevy 216 out-of-car engine start, and we want to make sure that the battery is fully charged. We will not be connecting up the single wire from the 12-volt alternator, so the battery does need to maintain a full charge on it. Part of the setup here, though, is our cooling system. We do have a makeshift radiator here that will help keep the engine cool under operation. And I also wanted to mention a feature that we didn't talk about earlier, and that was the Offenhauser valve cover. It is just an absolute beautiful valve cover. As you can see in here, that thing is absolutely solid. It is pure cast aluminum, highly polished, and a real solid enhancement to this engine. The original valve cover and aftermarket valve cover, basically same design, same look, everything's very similar, but it's pretty clear though that you can hear how tinny that is, and you can hear how tinny that is as well. I'd have been okay with it, but you know what we discovered is that the lips that make your seal to the gasket, even though they look very similar, did not quite work well for us, and we had a topside oil leak around that valve cover gasket, and no matter what kind of tweaking and bending and adjustments we made, we just could not get a good seal. So we bit the bullet and did the right thing and bought the Offenhauser valve cover, and we're real happy with it. We also need to talk about how this thing starts. What we have here is a push pedal inside the car, and when you depress that pedal, it actually activates the starter switch to the starter itself, which will engage the solenoid. And right next to it is the accelerator pedal. And we did have to modify and fabricate some linkage to make all this work together with the dual carb system. And the other thing that's noteworthy is when we bought these carburetors, we intentionally purchased the manual choke, and a lot of guys would tell you that you only need to run one manual choke with a dual carb system, but being rat rodders, we decided that when we set this thing up, we're going to go ahead and put the dual choke on it and just choke both carburetors when needed to get it started. So anyway, it looks like we're just about ready to make final preparations. We'll need to bring our fuel supply over and get things going, and we'll be ready to do this engine start. Okay, so as promised, we're ready to go ahead and do this 1948 Chevy 216 out-of-car engine start. We've been looking forward to this opportunity. I think we've made all of the necessary preparations. I do want to point out, though, that we did take a standard engine stand and modified it to accommodate a 4-position. You never want to do an out-of-car engine start on a stand where the engine is suspended, 2-3 feet above ground. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look around here and see what we got going on. First of all, we do have this one-wire connection from the AGI distributor. Again, that's our high-energy ignition distributor, and it goes down to a simple switch, and from there over to the battery. And in an emergency situation, of course, we've got this quick disconnect, and in normal mode, obviously, it would be switch on, switch off. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and turn this switch on, see if we can fire this guy up. And I'm going to put my foot behind here, and let's see what happens. Okay, we are continuing work on this 48 Chevy RATROD conversion. We've taken the front end down as far as we feel like we can, and the bolts to the steering gearbox have been removed. We'll be able to swing that aside so we can clean up the frame rails a little bit, and we're going to try to clean up the firewall as well. This originally was a 48 Chevy Fleetmaster Sport Sedan, the four-door model. We chopped it down to a custom two-door cab, and we've incorporated the center section of the roof into the back panel of the cab itself, and the rustier the better. That's what rat rodding is all about. We intend to build a custom flatbed for the back, and we'll be able to serve up our famous B&B barbecue at these various rat rod events. I don't know if we're going to get laughed at or applauded, but we sure are having a lot of fun. So once we take care of the frame rails and the firewall, then we'll work on cleaning up all of the components to the front end, some of which we'll paint, some of which will be new, and some of which will just basically be cleaned up to the original finish. And once we get the front end reassembled, we will reinstall that Chevy 216 six-cylinder for a 216 in-car start. Well, there it sits. We basically have the engine back in, and quite honestly, we've got a lot of issues we still need to work out. If there's fluid on it, it leaks or squirts or does some weird thing to us, but we're very confident that we can resolve all those issues. But today, I think we're just going to do a quick walk around and introduction, and we'll see maybe if we can't get it started up. But we certainly can't leave it run very long. It currently sits with open headers, and it does tend to irritate the neighbors a little bit. So anyway, here it is, our 48 Chevy RATROD that we have dubbed the Stump Jumper.